Figure out who's on the phone. Speaking of air conditioning, it's not on.
I don't know.
Why?
Oh, okay.
I'm hot flashing. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Steve. How are you?
Well, Steve May says this is Dennis.
Oh, hi. We see the name Steve and we see your phone number. Hi. So 2 people are calling Elizabeth.
This is the first time calling in, so I guess Steve found a way to personalize his phone number. I haven't.
Okay, so I'm going to see if I'm able, or who's going to, looking at participants, can we? Okay, one of us.
Yeah.
Let me try.
What are you trying to see?
Can I, is there a way for me to put a name?
Hey, Maurice, how are you?
Rename. So this is Dennis on 310424, right?
Yes, that's me.
Okay. Hi, Christy. Hi, Marius.
Hey.
Hey, Elizabeth. Oh, I know she's coming, but is she coming right behind you?
No.
Have you been to an in-person meeting?
First one in a while. Yeah.
So, but you know.
Yes,
Okay, Marius is here, Christy's online, Steve's online, Dennis is online, Teresa's here. We're all good. Well, where's Elizabeth? Okay, hurry up. Her son's going out to San Francisco, possibly to stay. So they had dinner tonight. So,
Oh, wow. Wow.
yes.
So he's moving there for, he's out of school already?
Oh, yeah. But, okay, you're being recorded, doesn't
Okay,
matter.
yeah.
But his father, her ex, works in social media up there.
Oh,
And he wants to work in social media, so.
okay.
So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so we're waiting for Elizabeth, sorry about that. And we could maybe start the meeting with introduction.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we're not officially convened without our chair, but why doesn't everybody introduce themselves, even though Elizabeth won't have met everybody, but she knows everybody anyway. So I'm Laura Myers, and I am a member of the UNNC board. I live in Angeles Vista, and I am UNNC's vice president.
Hello, I'm Marius. I'm a resident of Jefferson Park and long-term resident.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Masonette. I represent the West Adams Avenues on the board of the UNNC, and I'm also very active in our tree canopy here in South LA.
Okay, so now I'm moving to the screen. Christy?
Hi, I'm Christy Webb. I live on the Avenues and I'm part of this committee and I'm happy to be here tonight.
Steve? Steve? Or Dennis?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, we got Steve now.
Okay.
So sorry. Yeah, Steve Wallace, Harvard High.
Okay, and Dennis?
All right. Dennis Leskey, Harvard Heights representative on the council and co-chair of the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, so, oh, heck, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna share the screen with the agenda. I sure hope. Teresa, remind me how.
Close that.
Okay.
Close that. And then
Because I had these all open here.
go down to your, yeah. And then just click that.
And then go back to Zoom. Sorry, you guys, it's a little different than when we were just fully on Zoom. And let me know if you can see the screen. Anybody who's on the Zoom call, can you see the screen?
Dennis, thank you.
Okay, so, and Charlie's okay.
I got it.
You got it. Okay, so I've posted the agenda, and the first item was welcome, call to order. We already went through some introductions. Charlie, I know you've come and review the agenda. So we have a couple of things on this agenda. The first item would be general public comments. The second item is a proposed community impact statement regarding Council File 230801, which is basically about protecting our street trees. The third thing on the agenda thing is, and here comes Elizabeth, is a further review of a proposed community impact statement we did 2 months ago. We discussed here in this committee regarding requiring cooling apparatus, or in other words, air conditioning on all rental units. But our board asked us to kind of take a better look at it. And we are going to add a kind of routine item on this agenda and going forward where we would announce if we have any upcoming programs on climate change, sustainability, other environmental concerns. So to the extent that there is anything to announce, we'll just announce it every month. Is that your idea? An update on the KYCC tree plantings on Washington Boulevard. And then, as always, old business, if anything. So that is the agenda. I'm going to stop the share. Elizabeth Fenner, our chair, has arrived. We already went through most introductions.
Great.
And I hand the gavel to you to call for general public comments instead.
Okay, any general public comments? Hi, everybody, it's really great to see. And hi, Christy,
And Charlie's here.
and Charlie, and Steve, and Dennis. Hi. Great,
Hello.
it's great. Yeah, and I was happy and grateful for the plug that Laura made recently for the pool. And the pool at USC by the Expo Center, and Christy went there and is now a regular. So do you want to make a plug for the pool, Christy?
No, I don't want, I want to have it all to myself, but no, it's really lovely. It's delightful. It's very cool and fun to be outside swimming. You can imagine you're anywhere. But
And I'm
it's,
also-
it's really clean, and the staff are very nice. So it's perfect.
Yeah. I'm also really grateful to have Teresa here. Oh, very much. Oh, so it's nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
And to Marius, I'll just say that Marcy Jones wants us to get together and put plants back in their back patio at the library right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's
So-
discuss that.
Yeah.
So any other public comments? Anything to share?
Well, I
Celebrations?
get, well, we should ask, did anyone go to any of the alternative farmers markets? Because, Elizabeth and I did not. No, well, we'll get on that. Charlie, no. Okay, we'll still do it.
I went to the regular one. I just didn't branch out to other ones. So
Well, I drove past the Adams, Vermont one this week and said, I had said I would go there, but I'm on my way someplace.
Marius, did you go to a different one?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. It's not to do with this
Yeah.
coming month.
We'll do
Yeah,
it, we'll
yeah.
get around.
We'll
Oh,
make a plan.
okay. So I'm done.
Okay.
So the next,
Steve, Dennis? Any announcements? Anything at all?
No, not from
okay, so the next item will be we didn't print out the agenda.
And I didn't bring my
Okay.
laptop. I wasn't expecting to.
That's okay. So we know what the next item is,
Is it the
which
trees?
is the trees motion. So I'm gonna share the motion and then we'll start talking about it. Okay. So again, sorry, you guys. Here. Back to there. Shouldn't be this hard. But it is.
So you guys may have heard recently that during the strike, the writer's strike and now the actor's strike, SAG-AFTRA, some picketers were near NBC. And they were picketing along the building, and there were some ficus trees that had been pruned about a year or so ago. A couple of days after they started picketing, NBC hired a crew to come out and prune the trees even further. And everybody felt that it was retaliation to the picketers who were on the perimeter of the building. So the question became who pruned them and why? Those trees had been pruned by the city. They are parkway trees. They are maintained by the city. NBC confirmed that they had hired someone to do it. They came up with some excuse. And it turns out that the maximum fine that could be applied to them is $250 for the entire thing, not even per tree. So Kevin De Leon, council member for CD 15, I think. 14, put forth a motion to have the city CAO, Bureau of Street Services, and CLO, I think CLA, to review the fee structure for people and entities that damage street trees. And that's what this motion is.
Right. So it basically is considering, I think, how to charge them more money. Make it more of a thing that actually would prevent people from doing.
Well,
Maybe it
even
will,
if it
maybe
were
it won't.
$1,000, if NBC was really trying to retaliate against the strikers, the members who were striking, I think they would have done it anyway because they really don't want to have those, the unions around them. But yes, there should be some penalty that's commensurate with the value of the tree. And Santa Monica has a tree valuation structure that can actually determine the value of a tree. We not have that here. It's been something that's been, the city forest officer's been talking about. And this won't address that directly, but it will change the municipal code to have a greater fee for that.
So for those on the online on Zoom, well, I'm just trying to find out if everyone's read the motion, can I stop the share? Are we good with stopping the share at this point?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
And this was is in the agenda packet. Okay.
Earlier than I thought, sorry.
Okay, so is this in dealing with trees that are being pruned maliciously or some type of intent? Or is it for some other reason? Because what I'm concerned is if someone hires someone to prune a tree and they do it improperly, now you have to hire somebody else to come and do it properly. We don't want the person to be fined if someone comes out and does it, or if the city does it. They could do something improperly, somebody can just kind of cut it and say, okay, good enough. And say, it's not right, let me get this done right. We want to make sure that it's done for something, for that reason. It's kind of.
Well, I think the parkway trees belong to the city. So if
Okay.
you want your trees pruned, you put a request in through my 311, and you ask them to schedule a pruning on the tree. If a limb is broken, or if they're dangling branches or overhanging branches, the proper way is to go through my LA 311 to request that. So if someone hires their gardener to trim the tree because the branches are damaging their car, the sap coming from the tree is damaging their car, and that tree dies, that person should be held responsible for the death of that tree. So what's happening now, it's just, the whole thing is gonna be reviewed, the whole fee structure. Right now, most people, if trees die in the parkway caused by malfeasance, nobody files a complaint. Nobody, the city's not walking around finding out who damaged that tree and why did it die.
Right.
So-
And we had a recent situation, because the results will stay with us for years, but a recent situation where a neighbor got sick of the trees on Gramercy out on Cimarron 25th around the Clark Library, not having been trimmed, but he hacked away at them. And he kept going until he literally fell and broke his shoulder. So we had to stop.
How many trees did he damage?
12, 15,
He just got up on a ladder and.
and he took, yes, because and I had a conversation with him, I said, did you use my 311 and put in a request to have the trees removed? No, I didn't, this, complain about the city and,
Permanent damage.
it did, and I filed a complaint, they sent out an inspector who evaluated them, but it's kind of hard, just to be quite honest, when there are trees in the valley that entire lots of protected species are being cleared out, and they're behind in investigating those. For me to complain about the 12 trees around the UCLA library, which are still standing, they're,
Hacked.
They've been hacked, they're coming back, but they really did lose a lot of the canopy. So I'm not sure when we're gonna get that report, but they did start an investigation.
So,
Is there any comment on?
any comment?
So we have a draft
Charlie?
CIS when comments are over.
Okay. Steve, Dennis, anything?
Not for me.
Okay, thank you.
No, not me.
I think all of us who are sensitive to trees and tree canopy in the area feels like we can look at 100 trees around Los Angeles that have been improperly pruned. And it's so saddening. I remember there was a nice tree in front of a hairdresser that I went to, a hairstylist on Jefferson. And then I went back a couple months later and it was a trunk this size. It went up to 3 stumps. And I said to the lady, what happened here? And it was the shrug. It was the shrug. And I believe because she talked about how her father had helped her with this store, that he was trying to make their sign more visible. But until you tell people this is on you, this will be on you. So the business owner, the landlord, this is not your tree. You do not get to touch it without a permit. A permit and permission and or from the city. And you have to do it with a certified arborist or somebody who has some kind of licensing. So I like this thing is reactive because it's reacting to one issue,
Right.
but it addresses a concern that many of us have had, but a larger and more complex or intractable problem.
And there's a motion that's going through city council right now. It's 15049-S2. And Harris Dawson, council member from CDA, was just speaking about this when he first moved into his home. The whole block, and this is, CDA, so it's much further south from here, had a lot of trees. And then he said one day he noticed that somebody was out cutting down the trees and was like, well, why are you cutting down the trees? They said, oh, there's a disease in the soil. And he said, well, what are you talking about? He said, the UFD personnel said, oh, if you guys had put in this chemical, and he didn't know what kind of disease, he didn't know, then we would have been able to save the trees, but nobody wanted to put it in. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So they ended up cutting down all the trees. So it shows that there's a lack of community engagement when it comes to trees, a lack of concern, and it has to be dealt with on many fronts. And this is just, you're right, it's reactionary, where KPL was just mad about, only being $250, so he's asking for an investigation to figure out if we could have a greater fee structure.
But then we also need a campaign of information.
Yes, they're really.
That definitely is something that is I believe to be the forefront, because we always get to a point where people get angry and they put fines in, but I think the first thing is discussing the value of what trees do and how to create a more social and better neighborhood. One where people feel more engaged and ready to be a part of, as opposed to, well, okay, we're angry, we're gonna do this, because it feels like we always kind of get to that point in society where it's like, I'm tired and we need to put a fine on. And, you know, it can be kind of frustrating. So I really hope that we put up, you know, some funding towards that to really try and help address that. It's not just about, you know, people putting a tree and people have different ideas about trees and everything else. It's about engaging one idea of everyone to kind of come together on that. Yeah.
Maybe that's something we can add. I just did a quick draft.
I understand.
Because I realized I had to come over here to do it, so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this.
So I don't know if there's more after this.
I don't.
So our
I
draft,
think there is.
Just scroll down a little bit.
I'm trying to screw it up.
Just
There it is. There we go.
And I just put it in, so. You want me to read it really quick, Laura?
Yeah,
that's
and
okay.
then I think what we've just heard is that we might want to comment something about an education campaign.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. During a recent interview, the city forest officer, Rachel Malarich, commented that trees are the only city infrastructure that increases in value and identified the preservation of trees as the #1 priority of the Office of Forest Management. Shade, carbon sequestration, street heat reduction, noise reduction, and the overall well-being one experiences when near trees are difficult to measure, but not difficult to understand. As such, fines for damages to trees should be proportionate to the value they offer to the community. The City of Los Angeles must address intentional damage to our tree canopy with a fine schedule that reflects the importance and intrinsic value trees offer our communities. We support the motion to instruct the Bureau of Street Services to report back with the administrative fine schedule for violation of LAMC 62.169A, 62.171, or 62.174, commensurate with damages, including but not limited to the loss of shade, loss of carbon storage, increase to local average surface temperature of the street, decrease in local air quality and tree species. And
very
Yeah.
well. It's wonderful.
And then add something about education.
And notification, education and notification, because people should know, people should be made aware that it is actionable to act on a tree without a permit, without applying for a permit, without contacting the city that you're doing so. And that it would be the landlord's maybe responsibility in the case of a tenant doing damage.
Well,
Or,
I don't know why
Okay.
a tenant would, I don't.
well, business tenants might.
Yeah.
Like if a tree is like next to their car or something,
Right.
they ask the
Or-
landlord not to do it and then they don't do it.
Well, I was
Or in the
gonna,
case that Elizabeth said that maybe the owner of the building didn't know, but the people who had the hair salon, they removed it so that their sign could be
More
seen,
visible.
more visible, yeah.
oops. Do that. Okay, I don't know. As I'm busy playing, I don't know if anybody has their hands up.
I don't see it.
See.
tenants regarding it. Okay, so the add something, I think, says
I'm not,
says it all.
yes, I'm sorry. It says it all, but I'm not used to this computer, so I can't highlight it, but we know that would be adding something.
Yeah, okay, we can,
Yeah,
actually, I do most of the tree work that I do, I kind of go through planning and zoning because it's really to advocate for developers and make sure they don't clear the lot and that they plant trees. But we're not having another planning and zoning meeting before the governing board meeting. So what is it?
we would do a motion here,
Okay,
which,
okay. I wasn't sure how the process.
yeah, I mean, we would do in other words, this becomes an environmental committee recommendation. So,
I move that the environmental committee support this impact statement.
recommend to the governing board that it adopt
Great.
a community
The
impact statement based on this draft.
Can we go with Laura?
I second that.
Well, Teresa.
I second.
Or Christy might
Oh.
wanted to second it.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that right?
I second it.
Okay,
Motion.
okay.
Do you guys?
Do
take
we need
votes?
any more discussion?
We do take votes.
Oh,
It's just like,
okay.
Any more discussion on this in,
okay, I'm gonna stop the, wait, I'm gonna hit save.
because you just changed it, yeah.
And then I'm gonna stop the share. And we can vote.
You do.
All in favor of this community impact statement?
And Steve is raising his hand, and Dennis, are you voting?
I don't know how to raise my hand on a phone call.
I understand, so you can just orally vote. If you want.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm in favor.
It's unanimous.
Okay.
Great.
So the next item is the revisiting the motion to basically potentially require multifamily properties owners to install air conditioning in all of those units. And we had already,
Was that a CIS also?
yeah, we had created a I'm gonna reshare the agenda just because that's the language of the CIS that we had taken to the governing board, if I can.
So Laura brought this on behalf of the committee to the governing board, and many members had questions.
Mhm.
And instead of getting a no vote, which she probably would have received if she had forced the vote, she said, let me bring it back to the committee. So that's what she's doing. And Dennis was one of the people who had questions. There are a couple of I don't see them here tonight, but
Okay. I've done something wrong. I'm gonna try that again, you guys.
We need to do our minutes.
Well, there is a
it's here,
mouse.
it's all here.
No, that's not the issue. It's like, where is everything? So we had, as a committee, if you see the number 4 for the review, but the language there, extreme heat events are increasing in number and scope, and these heat emergencies can have a devastating medical impact. According to this new city council motion, at this point in the climate emergency, the ability to cool one's home cannot be considered a luxury and rather must be treated as a necessity. The city council has directed several city departments to report back regarding possible code amendments that could require landlords to install cooling apparatus and also possible assistance for tenants towards their increased electric bills to utilize air conditioners. This committee 2 months ago recommended that we would support this initiative, but with changes, including a request back, or requesting a report back on the cost to the property owners of electrical upgrades, and also a report regarding the impact of increased electrical usage for AC, for air conditioning, on the city's electric grid, and also the impact on climate change. So, and again, as Teresa pointed out, it started a discussion at the governing board that was going negative on this, but I don't think we had a clear idea of the total different reasons for the negativity. So Dennis was leading some of that.
Yes, I'm the sneaky one, so if I can raise my hand and speak, is it
Sure.
a good time?
This
Okay.
is a fine,
I would like a more holistic approach to this. To investigate the possibility of imposing requirements for rental air conditioning units, and also to somehow assist the apartment dwellers. I just took a look online at some things, and you really start by having some consultant come in and say, okay, we need to reduce the heat that's coming into the room. I've got an old house here in 1905, and we use blinds and drapes on the windows. So not just with the air conditioners, but take a look at all the things you can do to minimize the problem, reduce the heat generated in the room. everyone's switching to LED bulbs, unplugging electronics. Exhaust fans. We grew up with exhaust fans. I would like to see that as an alternative to give people an exhaust fan to cool their apartment. And as far as air conditioning, I was quite surprised to find that there's an $89 portable air conditioner that can run on batteries. It's rechargeable. It can cool a 300 square foot room. It can run for about 8 to 12 hours. It's essentially a version of a swamp cooler that uses the evaporative cooling effect by passing the air over some wet pads and coils and then blowing it into the room at much cooler. So I'm looking at much lower ways, more efficient and cost-efficient ways to do the same thing. So that's where I'm coming from on this.
Well, well put. Well put. Anyone else? Go ahead, Marius.
Yes, I actually been looking at a few videos on YouTube discussing this exact matter. And, there was been a lot of discussion in those videos about the effects of adding air conditioning to multiple units, and that air conditioners essentially push heat out into the surrounding area, increasing the heat effect that happens within the area, and including increasing electricity on the grid, as well as having problems with climate change adding to it. One of the big problems depends on the building that is being done. I mean, it does sound good. I agree with Dennis that there are other opportunities and other means to be able to cool a room, but not everyone's room faces a area where air can easily move or can be easily be removed. And some people, depending on the building, might not have access to a window or other means. And so this becomes a situation of if you only have like one window for the whole apartment, or maybe barely two, how do you properly get enough airflow within the room to be able to cool it? We've seen extreme temperatures in many parts of the Southwest and Southeast, and it's becoming quite prevalent, especially in the valley. It's becoming really, really, very hot out there, of how to do this. I would like to see how these can be done. For some buildings are very old, it's really difficult to do. Some are newer, so they're built with air conditioning already in it. How can this be applied so that the people who request relief can get relief, and that it can be done in a way that is beneficial to both, because the tenant and the owner. Many owners don't want to spend the extra money to try and do it because they're afraid the cost will make it not feasible for them to own the building. So it has to work out for both the tenant and the owner.
Steve has two questions.
Steve, you have the one.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks. So I own properties, and I get so frustrated. I understand the intent behind this. The people who are proposing this, I view as having really big hearts, but they are frequently misguided. And it's so easy for city officials to say, let's just push this off on to someone else to pay for. And the city basically gets to dictate policy that they've got no skin in the game. All they have to do is just say, okay, we decree this, and they're pushing the costs off onto someone else. And I doubt that any of them have ever owned income property and have any idea the burdens of that. First of all, obviously, we just went through COVID where no property owner could raise rents, even though my trash collection tripled because of a contract that the city itself negotiated without, any votes basically by the people who were actually affected. So that's another way for the city to just force others to bear huge financial costs that the city has, again, no skin in the game. And then my water went up dramatically. Property taxes have continued to go up. Insurance has gone up. Maintenance has gone up. To find someone to actually do maintenance, I have to do all the maintenance myself because I simply cannot afford people to maintain my properties for me. It's that expensive and difficult to get people to actually make any repairs. And so all of my expenses have been going up dramatically. I'm forced to do repairs without getting any benefit of any rent increases to pay for any of this for 4 years. I've had to do a soft story retrofit, which I needed to do, but the city just held a gun to my head and said, you have to do this in 2 years. So I spent $50,000 out of my own pocket to do this. This building is my retirement, and it's my business. And if I'm forced to do things, then that comes that's food off of my table. And so fine, the soft story was done. And now this air conditioning, it's insane. If the city wants to do this, the city could buy portable air conditioning units for every single tenant that requests one. The city should pay for this. The city should not, again, hold a gun to the heads of mom and pops and say, you now are going to have to upgrade your electrical, which is going to be exorbitant, and then pay for these units, which is also extremely expensive. We're talking probably $4,000 each for a split system per room. And then the electrical upgrades. And then after that, they have to do all the stucco repairs, the drywall repairs, the painting. It is so expensive. I absolutely agree with what Marius and Dennis have said. If the city really wants to do something, well, why don't they maybe fund cool roofs? There is a process that I simply can't afford to add 4 inches of heat reflecting foam on my flat roof. That will help a lot. And other mitigating efforts. Again, there are ways to go about this, but to force people to do something like this is insane. The people who want to do this have no idea how expensive it is. And again, they have no personal skin in the game. It's easier to pass legislation and say, oh, somebody else has to do it. We've done our job. So that's my event.
Any other comments? Laura?
Well, I have a comment and then I want to share the screen with the LADWP initial report because it has some interesting statistics about how much air conditioning is or isn't in out in rental units. But just a little piggyback on what Steve said, we are upgrading all the electric service to a 10-unit bungalow court building. Not for air conditioning, we just have to do it for other reasons. But the bare cost, so it's just the panels, the meters, the panels, and taking the electric into each apartment to a sub panel, times 10, but not rewiring, is $80,000. I mean, so $8,000, and that's not including the as he mentioned, plaster repair. It's not including any of that.
We might not need to get into the weeds on the DWP
Well, it's just
statistics. Did you have any?
No, I haven't.
Comment?
I do want to say, do we know if this is like small personal units for apartments, or is this like a full upgrade or something? Because I think that's what needs to be clear. If it's something like you just go to Home Depot and you purchase like a small air conditioner, you just put it to the outside, then that just kind of runs off of that unless you require a full electrical upgrade to support all the air conditioners that we're running.
Right. Well, I think where the discussion is going, and can we see that?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, you should.
so maybe I need to show the top of that column. I'll do that.
Scroll.
Yeah, I'm having trouble.
Have her-
scrolling.
Go ahead and scroll
Let
up.
me just do it.
Okay. So, 'cause we need, there you go. These are percentage. So if we look, I know you didn't really want to do this, but if you look at the second half of this on the rentals, far more rental properties do not have any air conditioning than do. Right, so that's I think the key thing, and this is 2019. So I think the discussion at City Council is a little bit that maybe it is a window unit or a roll around one, and maybe keep one you would use the word, I think, performance standard, like one room to be kept at a certain temperature, not a whole apartment. But I don't know how that's very enforceable.
Well, so, and yeah, I mean, I'm really liking this discussion. I think, and to add something to this, we don't know how many of these units experience great heat. It's reasonable to say that a landlord needs to provide livable space. We already say that with heat, right? So a landlord is required to provide a certain heated space for all tenants. In the winter, we know that. So now we're adding that to the summer, that a landlord is required to provide livable area, right? But just like I think Dennis said, that's sometimes achievable through drapes, through blinds, through fans. Remember in my Northridge house, I had a whole house fan that I would run twice a day to clear out stale air, to bring in the afternoon air. That was truly when it did get cool at night. But when we talk about percentages, how many percentages of the units are experiencing too much heat? I have a friend who says his house gets 90 degrees when the afternoon hits it. That's untenable. That's not right. But if we handled complaints rather than this blanket, every landlord, every space, every situation, which you're right, creates this hostility between city and landlord that we really don't want, because then there'll be hiding and sneaking and shortcuts and various things. Remember with Volkswagen and how the emission standards for their cars, they falsify the records. So I think it's possible also in our given technology of, what is it, the Ring doorbells, to put, if there's a complaint about an apartment staying too hot, couldn't they put in some kind of battery powered thermostat and make sure that standard is established at least in one room?
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask the.
And finally, just to bookend this, by hook or by crook, does that landlord put in a whole house fan? Does it put in fans, ceiling fan? Does that put in that unit that you mentioned, it's a tabletop unit that's affordable, so that they understand that it's a responsibility to provide a livable area, and they can do it by sort of on any means necessary? I think this needs to be written over starting from the beginning.
Right, well, I was gonna say, I see Steve's hands up, but can I, Steve, is it okay if I say something and then we'll?
Yeah,
What do you-
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm gonna take the devil's advocate other view. What if your tenants are senior citizens or in ill health? Do you have a different responsibility than if it's just me or you? I mean, in other words, what's the landlord's responsibility to someone for whom an extreme heat event could prove really medically dangerous? Does a landlord have a responsibility?
and again, you are creating this scenario creates an environment that invites age abuse, because a landlord is not going to want to rent to someone who's older. Oh, Steve?
On that note, Steve?
Yeah, a couple things. The first is energy usage. And like Liz, I also installed a whole house fan probably about 20 years ago. And Eileen and I have successfully used that to cool our house. We finally got a heat pump like 2 years ago in our own house. And I think we've used it maybe 4 times in 2 years because the fans themselves are so effective. And I have a 9-unit apartment building that is 2 floors, and I encourage tenants to turn on the fan above their stoves, which exhausts hot air out of the kitchen area and the room itself during the day, and that's highly effective. AC, I found even a very efficient heat pump uses probably 4 times the amount of power that the whole house attic fan does that actually cools the entire second floor. And the energy usage that will be increased by having AC units, even they're super efficient, even if they're, I'm saying a split system is what I'm assuming the city is envisioning for these units. I cannot put solar. I have solar on my own home with a battery backup. I cannot install solar on my 9-unit apartment building because I would generate so much power that would have to run through the house power meter, which I don't use that much house power. And the excess that I would generate, DWP gets that for free. They don't have to pay me for it. I get a credit, but they do not have to reimburse me for that. And so it's not, even though I really, really, really want to install solar on that building, because it also creates a little thermal gap between the panels themselves. There's an air gap between the panels themselves and the top of the roof. That also cools the building. So I would love to put solar up there. I would love to put that 4-inch foam up there, which would be huge for that building. But I can't do the solar because I would just be giving the DWP free energy, which they don't want. So that's maddening. And so the other thing is, if the city wants to have these unfunded mandates, which this is, then fine. I would be happy to do any unfunded mandate, just eliminate rent control. And therefore, I'd be able to afford these things. None of us want that. And Laura knows, Eileen and I personally took care of a 99-year-old tenant for probably 4 years. We inherited her, we became her family, and we took care of her. During COVID, because landlords could not, if a tenant stopped paying, landlords could not force them to pay. So many mom and pop landlords ended up selling their properties during COVID. Guess who bought those? Institutional investors. So these large commercial real estate corporations now own those buildings. The mom and pops will take care of that 99-year-old tenant. A commercial property owner will not. They will increase the rent every single time. They will not manage the properties well. They will not manage them well because they're just looking at the bottom line. Mom and pop owners generally do. They take care of their tenants better. They take care of their properties better. And so what a great idea it was to say, mom and pop landlords, you cannot collect your rent. And if you lose the property, tough darts. So again, it comes from the heart. We want to protect the tenants, but they're not thinking this through. And this is another unfunded mandate that, again, it would be great if I could actually generate the income to pay for it. It would be fine. But they're saying you can't raise the rent. Sometimes you can't even collect the rent, but we're still going to make you pay higher water, higher trash, higher insurance, higher property tax. And we are going to make you start paying for these other improvements that you don't get to get reimbursed for. So again, big heart, but they're just not thinking it through.
You're combining passion and logic, Steve. But Teresa has a comment?
Yes, I do. Actually, I have a question for you, Steve. So as Elizabeth mentioned, you have no problem providing heat for your residents. We all recognize during the winter, even though we have mild winters here, that is something that is reasonable and is mandated to provide heat. We're in the middle of a climate crisis. I mean, I understand your comment about putting more heat into the environment, but we have a responsibility not just to the tenants in your building, but to our society to protect people from this climate crisis, and it's only going to get worse. So we can not require any air conditioning, and in 10 years and 20 years, when it's increased at a degree or two, when it becomes stifling inside, and then we can do it. We could try to advocate for the city to provide funding, LADWP to give tax credits, to provide some kind of funding for electrical upgrades. I kind of like the idea about ceiling fans. I mean, that does reduce it a little bit. What kind of electrical upgrades would be required for ceiling fans? Maybe that's something that LADWP could provide to landlords or homeowners, ceiling fans.
I don't, oh,
Yes.
This is Dennis. Can I get back in the queue?
Sure.
absolutely. Go for it, Dennis.
Oh, okay. We're pushing this to the point of one of the things I have a little bit of knowledge on. This is they're pushing into an area of tenants' rights, and there's such a thing in the state. It's called the warranty of habitability. And as soon as you start mentioning, yes, we do supply heat for people, you've got to supply enough warmth for them. You've got to supply toilets. You've got to supply water. You've got to provide air. Someday this may get to the point of you've got to provide cooling. We're considerably removed from that at this point. And I would just like to add a footnote to what I was saying earlier about these little portable coolers. There is one. I don't want to advertise in what we submit to the city, but the name happens to be Chillwell, CHILLWELL, and it's $180. It's on sale for $90, and it is a portable air chiller that they say will cool to a comfort level of 300 square foot room. So that really does meet the needs where we're talking about, let's say, somebody who's a senior or someone who can't get out, or just plain someone who needs to have their room cooled off a little bit. You can cool off the bedroom with that. That's really what most people do when they make their first step towards air conditioning, is just cool a sleeping room. So once again, that gives the city in its investigation a much easier stepping stones than talking about re-electrifying a building with air conditioning. That's my comment.
So we've talked about multiple options for keeping a place cool. There are many options, and I think the main point is, do we expect landlords to provide whatever options it would take to keep an environment in a livable, what we would consider a livable temperature?
Well, again, what the motion is discussing, not our motion, but the city's motion, is requiring we'll say the landlords to, whether it's one or a whole house, but I think in the end it'll come down to guessing to a single room with a single unit of air conditioning. So the question is, I mean, that's not that expensive for one mom and pop who has one unit. But if it's a mom and pop, but they own 3 buildings and each building has 6 units, it's still mom and pop. So they're not discussing how the landlord side is paid. I mean, in other words, in these reports that they're already beginning to generate, they're really still only discussing the cost to the tenants, because to operate them will cost the tenants money. And then LADWP in its report is talking about that it has a program for lower income people, and they do. I mean, you can go on the website and you can, depending on your income level, you might be able to get a free air conditioner. But a person who owns the property is not going to be able to get the air conditioner, and in fact doesn't have the electrical account, because most rentals, the tenants have the account anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a little disconnect in that approach, and none of it is discussing if you need to upgrade the electrical just to plug in. And I think of ceiling fan, you would not need to normally, but you might, because you might have a knotted tube chandelier, and you could not put a new fan in that ceiling outlet because it will require a grounded line.
So am I getting this disconnect that a tenant could get a discounted or free air conditioning unit to put in their own?
They could do it right now.
They could
don't
do it
now. Right now, a lower income tenant, they have a program on LADWP for discounted, they've just negotiated some prices. anyone could
But
get.
but now the city is requiring that not the tenant get their own air conditioning
Right.
at for free cost, but the city is now requiring
Considering
landlords, considering requiring
the
the
landlord
landlord to
get
handle
them.
that with no discount whatsoever, even though the tenant could get discounted
Correct.
today. And so I think we've identified the
There's
essential fatal flaw in this proposal. It's not well thought
one
out.
potential fatal flaw. There
One
seems
of
to be
many.
more. And then going back to our discussion 2 months ago, which is what's the impact on the electrical grid and what's the impact on sustainability
Emissions.
and climate change? I mean, in other words, kind of the mission of this
And then what
committee
Steve-
isn't necessarily affordable housing or, housing.
Yes, we're about
Oh,
emissions and
I mean,
nature. Yeah.
Oh, Steve has his hand up again, but are we gonna be focused this time?
Steve, we gotta figure out a way to get you net metering, to get all of us net metering. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
Here. So, as Laura was saying, as far as expenses, it would be about $20,000 per unit for one unit. So again, just
You're talking about rewiring an entire
You're
unit.
gonna have to
not
bring-
just
yeah.
upgrading.
Yeah,
Okay.
because frequently it's, 40 to 60 amps. Generally, you're gonna need more than that. You're gonna need, so you're running new cables to the unit, a new sub panel. You're gonna have to open up the walls and have that unit in, wherever that is. You're gonna have to have up on the roof, you're gonna have outlets up there, convenience outlets, you're gonna have blah, blah, blah. Then there's all the repairs. So figure $20,000 per unit. So I have to say it again. I want these individuals to look at their own checkbook and say, if the city made me spend $20,000 that I don't even have, what am I to do? And yes, the rules are changing as far as climate. And yeah, it's changed for everybody, but it's not fair to change the rules of the landlord-tenant city relations and put it all on the landlord without giving the landlords the means to pay for it. So they are saying, again, you have to pay for this, you have to pay for that. Oh, and we're going to add this, but you are not allowed to collect rents or any increased rents to pay for this. So where's the money coming from? That's why people are selling their properties. It simply is not financially feasible. So the numbers just don't add up. So it's obviously I'm frustrated.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Charlie, you had a comment?
A question, with those ones that tenants can get for free if they're low income. So Steve, is what you're saying that basically like even if a tenant was able to get that, then many buildings wouldn't even have the like infrastructure to support plugging that unit in. Is that right?
Correct. I'm saying,
Yeah,
yeah.
sometime.
And also the plug, the 3-prong grounded
Right.
plug that might need to be on a dedicated circuit because of the draw of the thing, also needs to be really adjacent to the window
Right.
that you're sending, you're venting it, either sticking a window unit into, or you have a portable unit, but it still has a venting thing that goes into a window. So it has to be, you can't use an extension cord.
Right.
You plug
It
direct.
has to be direct.
So that wouldn't normally be a location anyone in the past would have put a plug.
Got it.
Necessary. So, and if your service in our older buildings in this community, like the 20s and 30s buildings, that if it hasn't already been upgraded, the typical service was 40 or 60 amps for each apartment. And to have a dedicated line for an air conditioner, that's another 20 amps, but you can't just upgrade, because I've learned lately the rating of the wiring in a 40 amp panel with a meter, that rating doesn't allow you to just change the panel to 100 because it's the wrong size wire. So that's why it gets so expensive. It all has to be redone.
I have, if I may.
Yeah.
Can we write the CIS to say something that it's mandatory for buildings over that were built 1970 or greater, whenever that standard electrical panels came in, everybody, buildings that are younger or older than that, maybe there is some subsidy or something that the city can offer to landlords to help, cover those costs. I mean, I'm just thinking last year, remember how hot it was and the libraries were closed?
Right.
And
It was awful.
people, I'm just thinking of
Yeah.
one of our fellow board members in Jefferson Park. She didn't have an air conditioner. She's a house, but she didn't have an air. She had to go try to get one. She couldn't find one because they'd already sold out at Lowe's.
Right.
So it was really.
It was very, very hot. And Dennis, I didn't have a big chill. They have a little desktop version, the little chill, yes. And they work really well, except you have to pour ice cubes in them. So I was finding myself, and I don't have crushed ice cubes at home. So I was going to 7-Eleven at 11 o'clock each night. So I could have, and they were very nice. They didn't even charge me, but I would bring home 2 cups of ice cubes to pour in the thing so I could plug it in. And it's small, it's right next to my bed, and it worked very well.
Okay.
I mean, that works very well, but I don't think the city is going to mandate the purchase of these big chill cubes. And it wasn't very expensive, but it's like silliness. But it worked.
So should we go ahead and motion or something?
Right,
So what are we doing with this motion then?
Well, I think the discussion tonight would be we had already said we would approve, but with changes. And now are we kind of saying we don't approve, we don't support it?
Do we know when this motion's gonna come before?
Well, the council's already moved they've already passed it in general, then they're at the reporting stage. And so we were asking for more reports.
Okay.
With changes and more reports. So we could do the same thing or oppose it unless it's changed, which maybe is a better way to say it, with more reports and more, and more.
Complex.
Well,
Consideration of.
more
older-
consideration of.
Of the overall, the spectrum
The
of
Right, but also that
apartment
it's an unfunded mandate for
Yeah.
the mom and pop property owners.
homes.
And it doesn't differentiate between buildings built before a certain day.
And we're a
other-
historic community, so we have historic,
Right.
most of our homes are old, so
Right.
that's an undue burden on.
Right, and I would,
And other techniques or mitigation efforts
Right.
that can lower temperature.
right, so Dennis, does that finesse, that sort of that we just discussed, but we have not, I know we're not gonna sit here and write it. But Dennis,
Laura,
would that,
Thank
does
you,
that
Laura.
meet your
I think
objections?
we should, I think, pardon me, I think our comments should address what the city's doing. They're saying they're going to investigate this, and we want to, we're not going to tell them we don't want you to investigate it. That's not going to sell very well. But that any investigation should include, and I would weave into that, the very sort of things we just got through discussing.
Right,
So should we bring it back to this committee or before we bring it to the governing board?
being with a draft to look it up.
Is that
maybe
something
need
we
to-
can do offline?
I think we could create a draft, but we should bring it back to this committee, so it defers it, that's okay, because they're in the reporting stage.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so,
think we could, this was very substantive, this is very meaningful conversation, and I think I'm glad that it's being recorded, because I think we can draft something that's pretty comprehensive.
okay, all
Would
right.
everybody here be willing to weigh in on, we'll do it next month?
We'll have to do it next month, we can't really do a
Yeah.
email, I mean, you and I could,
Okay.
you, Marius and I could,
But I can't.
but only one board
Yeah.
member could,
Okay,
right?
so we'll bring it back to this meeting and hope that Steve, Dennis, everybody else is here also next.
Right,
next
well, the draft we can make the online packet early, and we can upload a draft 2 weeks before the meeting. That part's easy, and there's no problem with us sending out an email to everyone here and other members of the committee who are not here, to say, here's the link to
for the
the
agenda
packet, and we have a draft in it for our next meeting. There's no problem with that, we just can't discuss it in a thread.
Yeah.
Okay,
Agreement in general on that? Do we need a movement,
I
a
don't
motion
think
to
we
do
need a
that?
motion.
But I want to say that I feel like this has been really good conversation, and I think we could nudge the city into the direction of a less hostile landlord versus tenant relationship, and with more creativity, and they'll get more credit for any efforts that they make, all the efforts that they make, especially the effective ones, to keep their tenants comfortable.
Right, because I do worry about, people with health issues or age,
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a couple of other things on the agenda.
Yeah, and that's.
I'm happy to help with the draft if you guys
Oh.
need an extra pair of eyes. I'm happy to collaborate on that with you guys too.
Cool, okay,
Thank you.
oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
I'm not a board member anymore, so I'm
No,
not.
I'm doing a pun.
Oh, cool! I got it.
What else have we got on our?
The other things on the agenda were sharing the upcoming events and,
We all probably, go through social media and the internet and see that things happening in the area. And I came upon a notification for a group called YIMBY that's having a happy hour at Union Station, I think either on the 12th or the 23rd, I'm not sure.
what was, it was actually environmental something.
It was, I don't know, just a happy hour at Union Station, and I brought it to Laura's attention, and then she mentioned to me it's actually not there. I need to learn more about that group, because the group is not pro historic property or neighborhood character retention, but all about just increasing the density.
Well, they're promoting the building of buildings
Yeah, right.
that have no setbacks and no open space. So that's not very environmental,
Right.
so it's kind of the opposite. So the group was.
So you were thinking about attending because you thought that they were,
Yes,
oh, okay.
yeah, that we were on the same page, so to speak, about quality of life and density.
And
Right.
this is the
So,
group
but
that's
I'll
come to
still-
planning and zoning before, right?
Yeah, well, so I will tell everybody what it was, if you want to write this down. It's the Housing and Climate Happy Hour. It's at Homebound Brew House, but it's at Union Station, literally at Union Station, Thursday, August 24th, 6 p.m. And it's a thing called Homebound Brew, BREW House, HAUS, 800 North Alameda Street. And it's urban environmentalists, but their parent network is YIMBY. So it just seems like YIMBY action. So it seems like there's a little disconnect between an environmental. So I thought, besides saying, hey, you could go, or not, that we should invite the urban environmentalists to this committee at some point and have a discussion, because I suspect they're good-hearted people who
Yeah.
may not realize some of the negative effects, but they may tell us that we're being naive. It'd be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and the communication would be meaningful. And the underlying idea on my part was that I'd love to see any of you guys at an event. I'll go to an event. I'll go to
Well,
a
you
tree
went to one last
planting.
time.
Yeah, I'll go to a tree planting. I'll go to a native, or rather, invasive species removal event. I'll go to trash cleanup. And it's fun to be around people who are trying to help the environment.
Well, that's what we learned when we all went to, well, you were in Wichita, to the composting workshops. We had fun,
Yeah,
right? Charlie's daughter had fun.
yeah, yeah. So just an invitation to everybody. If there's an event that you see and you're going to it and you just like a few more people, to invite fellow environmentalists, then think of us.
Right. Okay, and the next item was an update on KYCC trees, which we don't really have a full one, but we will next month.
Yes, Laura and I are talking to them tomorrow to go back and review and, it's gonna get, there's a new gentleman who's, attached to this project now, so we'll see what he says.
Right. But, well, the mini update is that the trees we saw planted on Washington and 18th were not planted by KYCC, and nobody seems to know who did.
And not whether they're getting watered.
Correct, because we don't know who did it. And I will say that this motion that went through city council, 150499S2, they asked for funding for UFD to set up a system so they can keep track of all the tree plantings. Because I don't know how it's being managed right now, but they do not have, the tree wells are almost all identified in the trees, but they do not know if someone plants a tree who's taking responsibility for that.
And who is UFD for the?
Oh, Urban Forestry Division. So,
Yeah, so, and UFD itself also doesn't have any trees identified in those site locations.
and UFD had yellow tags, just FYI. They when they actually do plantings, they put yellow tags
Right.
on them, so.
So, I think what the KYCC is still intending to try and plant in October, but we'll find out tomorrow.
Which means that you guys will have to come up with the subsequent years of water.
Yeah, we're gonna have to start that real fundraising that we talked about.
I'm trying to get some water bags for my bike, so I can take a ride.
Well, I don't think UFD is gonna say, oh, Elizabeth can water
Water all
25
of
trees for
them.
5 years,
No,
or
no.
4 years, because we have 1 year of funding.
And I'm sorry, guys, this is
We gotta
the-
go.
This is the last night, or this is the last week that my son is in town before he moves to San Francisco. So I'm gonna go run and have dinner with him.
Oh, I
And
thought you guys already did it.
no, we did not. We ordered takeout and
It took forever.
it took forever. So thank you so much for coming. It's so nice to see you guys.
Good night, everyone.
I,
Okay.
okay.
So I'll do,
You're gonna-
yeah, I'll just.